Do you want to live more sustainably but aren't sure where to start or how it fits in with your everyday living? The Renewy Living podcast simplifies sustainability so you can feel confident to take small, meaningful actions that fit into your lifestyle. Based on the lands of the Awabakal and Worimi people in Newcastle, Australia, you'll learn how to live lighter on our planet through practical ideas, stories from like-minded people, and examples of businesses doing great things. With an open heart and mind, join me, Marty Lee, as we explore how to consume less, build stronger community connections, and thrive in your neighbourhood, wherever you call home. Welcome to the Renewy Living podcast. Hello, my name's Marty Lee, and welcome to the Renewy Living podcast. We've become so used to having flowers available year-round that we rarely stop to think about where they come from or what happens to the packaging and the presentation waste. In this episode, I'd love you to meet Bec Humphris, florist and founder of Sydney-based florist Not Just a Pretty Flower. Her business exists to inspire and nurture reconnection to nature. She's a proud member of the Sustainable Floristry Network and applies sustainable floristry design and principles in her work. This conversation is about the importance of collaboration and good communication across every part of a business, and how that shared care, passion, and collaboration positively impacts the joy that flowers bring to all of your senses. We'll explore what choosing better, more sustainable flowers really means, and you'll find out that there's so much more to floristry than a pretty flower on the table. G'day, Bec.
Hi, Marty.
It's really lovely to finally have a chat to you on the podcast because I first met you a few years ago as part of your role and my membership with SECNA, which is the New South Wales peak body for social enterprise.
It is super special and a little bit surreal because I've listened to your podcast, and then also, obviously we've had that relationship through SECNA and gotten to know everything you're doing through Renew Living. So such a pleasure to be chatting finally today. It's coming full circle.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about sustainability, isn't it? Like it's all about being that full circle concept.
Yeah, I think this is what I'm finding. All the worlds just mesh and the people mesh. So thank you so much for having me, Marty.
Let's start with understanding what sustainable floristry really means. I mean, what is it? And more importantly, what's that difference between ethical, eco-friendly and native floristry compared to sustainable floristry?
Yeah, there's some big terms there. And I think it's really important to just start by prefacing that wasn't always a florist, and I'm by no means an expert. I'm very young in my journey and learning, and always going to be learning. So in terms of what is it, I'm by no means the authority, but as you mentioned in the beautiful opening, I'm a Sustainable Floristry Network member florist. Those terms that you mentioned before, so like eco-friendly or ethical floristry, like for me, my understanding of those is a term that someone is using to describe their particular approach to floristry. When we talk about sustainable floristry, we're looking at floristry, so the art, the profession, and the industry through the lens of science and research. Sustainable floristry is supporting the environmental, the social, the economic requirements of present and future generations. So really, if we sort of look at what's the goal of doing sustainable floristry, it's to collectively reduce our negative impacts when we're using flowers and practice and design and run our businesses in a way that are putting those principles, those evidence-based principles first.
Being sustainable as part of a business practice is really important. And I know that, let's go back to my own thoughts about flowers and floristry. And it was only a few years ago that I realised that many of the flowers that we have in Australia that you see at florists are imported, and that they come on the plane, like just as the normal plane, not a special cargo plane, but just a normal passenger plane. It's a part of the cargo on the normal passenger plane. And for some reason, I only thought the thing that was imported was Singapore orchids. That was was my only thought. How wrong I am to find that out. There's more flowers than the Singapore orchids that get imported.
You're absolutely not alone, Marty. I have also thought in the past about Singapore orchids. That is the sort of key one. But in Australia, we do import a lot of flowers. The reasons for this are nuanced, but sort of a key one being that there are flowers like roses, for example, what we call like a premium rose, that grows in the conditions where they are most suited to. And so number of those imports come from the places like Colombia and Ecuador, Kenya and Ethiopia. They're traveling hundreds of thousands of kilometers. So obviously there's a huge carbon footprint associated with that, not to mention the emissions that come with that cold freight, the cold chain transport system. So it is interesting thinking about those flowers. It's not just in the name like Singapore orchid. There is a whole range of flowers, and I've talked about roses being one that do come from overseas, and you don't know, right? So let's just put ourselves as a consumer. You walk into a florist, you see flowers. There's not labels saying I come from Ecuador, I come from Ethiopia, I was grown here. Maybe there is in some places, and that would be great. We should definitely talk about sort of provenance a bit more, but yeah, you don't know until you ask. You don't know until you ask, and so that is certainly something. When I talk about sustainable floristry and being a Sustainable Floristry Network member florist, those principles, the first principle is choose better flowers. And what that means in the principle sense is choosing local, seasonally grown flowers where you can. And so my approach has been, since I've started my business, is to use Australian grown flowers. And we have so many beautiful flowers. And I do think it's worthwhile saying, when I say Australian grown, the first thing that comes to mind is natives. So yes, I use Australian native flowers, but Australian grown, which means all sorts of other beautiful flowers that aren't just natives as well.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction to make because, again, as exactly as you said, you think of Australian flowers, you think of wildflowers, but they've also got some challenges as a cut flower. Not all of them survive and thrive as a cut flower, and also to grow them on masses. So what does a local flower mean to you in this context?
One of the biggest rewards of being a florist has been getting to know the growers at Sydney Flower Market. So our largest wholesale market is out at Homebush, our Flemington Market. And it's really exciting because this year they had their Golden Jubilee, so 50 years of that market. And I really encourage, if you're on social media, but you can also go online, to have a look at the stories that Sydney Flower Market have shared. So there have been growers there that have been there from the beginning. Like, we wouldn't have the flowers that we have now and the market we have today without them. So there's generations, third, fourth generation families out at Sydney Flower Market selling the most beautiful produce and beautiful flowers you can imagine. So what it means to me is going to that market and getting to know the growers. And that is something that I have my trainers. So when I did my certificate 3 at Pearson's to thank, it was one of the things that resonated very early on was, if you want a career in this, so one of the trainers saying to me, you have to go to market. You have to be out at market, build those relationships, get to know the growers. My background was in client work in corporate. And so client relationship building was very embedded in me, but it's also the best part. Like, I want to know the story of the person who grew it, their attachment to the flower. It makes it so much more interesting. And then I see my role and why it's important to me as being a conduit for that flower to then the person. So I'll walk into the market, and something I'm getting much better at is, it's been a learning process starting a business, but taking the intention. So what someone is trying to say or express through flowers. And you might have heard me talk about this before. I say which flowers speak to me, and they do. Like, you walk into the market and certain flowers just jump out at you. And I do know that that is in large part because that person, the grower's soul and their care and love is imbued in that flower. You can feel it and see it. And then when they talk about it, it's just electric. It's so exciting. So yeah, being that conduit between that moment and then giving that person that flower or flowers, and that meaning continues and manifests, is incredibly special.
I think you've already just hit the nail on the head in terms of that relationship, like how important relationships are, and that you are the conduit between the growers and your customers. And I can imagine the sense of excitement that both you and the growers would feel that you're there to support each other.
Oh, 100%. It's so special. And so when I was like prepping for this podcast and I was reflecting, one of the things I wrote down, because I often say it in my head, but I think it's good to write these things down. I wrote down like this feeling I have, like an overwhelming feeling. I'm getting teary thinking about it. When I see like the passion behind the growers, like creating these beautiful flowers and like the love and care that's gone into trialing some of these products, it's like all I want to do is just share that with the world. Like all I want to do is give people like Paula's beautiful hot pink variegated red roses. All I want to do is show the world Craig's Mulla Mulla that he's trialed and like got incredible varieties of. All I want to do is show the beautiful smoke bush that Daniel has laboured over and they've been picking since God knows what hour in the morning. And, that's all I want to do is just show them how incredible our growers are. Have you ever grown anything, Marty?
I
Like,
have.
do you grow
Yeah,
things?
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I struggle with this answer, right? Because I grow native flowers,
Yay!
which is fantastic, and they're very, very easy. I did try a vegetable garden, and I know the challenges of growing a vegetable garden. And at one stage in my career, I did work for a local online fruit and veg grocer, and I
Oh my
just
gosh,
I had that
cool.
like you, like in terms of the provenance of talking to the actual producers and the growers, and the challenges are big. So there's two sides of what I need to ask you really is what are the suppliers' challenges and what do you hear and the good things that come out of it? And the other thing we need to talk about is, when you grow something, how challenging that can be and what that actually means for you.
Yeah, so I will make the distinction, like, I'm not a grower, I'm not a flower grower, I'm a florist. But that one of the most important things of trying to apply these sustainable forestry principles and getting to a more sustainable flower, it comes right back to that starting point. And so that's certainly something that the SFN are exploring alongside and walking alongside the growers on. But for me, it comes back down to that relationship and talking to the growers, getting to know what are the challenges that you have. And because if we're more cognizant of that, we can communicate that to our customers. So, like an example might be, and I think it's a good example around packaging. What a lot of consumers don't see is because florists remove this in that production stage or conditioning stage, we call it, is soft plastic wrap, so single-use soft plastic wrap. A lot of the flowers at Sydney Flower Market and in markets now come wrapped in that. And the reasons for that are nuanced. For example, when you think about transportation and packaging and like being able to get the flowers all combined together, it's much easier to do that, sliding them in and out of buckets. So, it's a very florists, I think, are good at handling flowers out of the market and being gentle with the product, but it's very easy to slide them in and out of buckets, protection, so on and so forth. So I know all this now because I've been, lucky to have conversations with other florists who there was a working group looking at soft plastic use and talking with the growers. So in that exploratory phase of what are the issues, how do we move away from this, why do we use them, what are some alternatives? So trying to understand that more. And there's also been countless people before me who are and still are working together to find ways to change some of these system level issues because they are big system level issues. But what I will like comment on is just talking to the grower about. So talk to me like what do the plastic sleeves do here? Have you looked at this? Have you used this? And I'll just say to them, I'm like, oh, I take my soft plastic to Randwick City Council's recycling centre. I'm super grateful that we have one. Look at the mounds that I've like stored up. But what I really want to get towards is not having to do that. Can we design it out at the first stage, which is the other principles, sustainable forestry principles, designing out waste. So at the moment, one of the things I'm finding the most, exciting is that there is lots of system level change happening. So Creative Skills Services Australia, so they're leading change on the education level, so reforming the Certificate 3, so to reshaping the education for florists in the future. We've been lucky to be part of those industry consultations and joining a roadshow on that. So just, really excited for that. The SFN, as I mentioned before, are working alongside growers to look at how they can grow a more sustainable flower. So, and then there's also Flowers New South Wales group, which are running amazing programs with consulting, agricultural consulting specialists as well to literally get hands on into the farms to say, how can we look at our pest use? How can we look at integrated pest use? And how can we look at how we reduce our plastics on the farms?
Yeah, wow, that's pretty big stuff because systems change is one of the hardest and the slowest things to change about being more sustainable. But it sounds like when you have that collaboration, when all the parties are working together to recognize that there's a positive outcome, that everyone needs to work together, it sounds like, steps can happen.
Absolutely. And I will call out a particular grower, so the Janama family. They grow out in the Southern Highlands, beautiful family owned farm. And you'll see them, They are out at Sydney Flower Market, but they're also at Carriage Works markets. Their flowers are just incredible, beautiful, but they made a conscious decision that they didn't want to use plastic sleeves, and so they don't. And I think that's to be really celebrated. So when I get to the market, one of my approaches is I'll try and find the best quality bloom in the market that's Australian grown. There's no sort of labeling, as I mentioned, you got to go around and look. But if that means I can get one without a plastic sleeve and it's just one less thing, then that's a win.
Yeah, working together. What kind of impact do you think that the relationship that you have between suppliers and customers has on people?
It's a good question. I don't know if I know the impact yet. What I do see when something is delivered, or I tell my customer about, so for example, I'll deliver something and I'll tell them where it was grown and I tell them about the flower. I see gratitude. That's what I see. I see people often are quite delighted by having that extra sense, like that extra bit of information. There's like an oh wow moment. I didn't know that. Oh wow, I didn't realize there's that sense of wonderment. And I think it's so critical that we talk about where things come from. And certainly in flowers, the more that I'm focusing on this as a business, I'll pick up everything now and be like, I wonder where this came from. So it's just like, it's never ending. And it does comes back, and we've talked about this before, coming back into that rhythm of living the seasons, and not just our Western understanding of seasons, but all much more seasons. And that's where First Nations knowledge, and they have been living with the seasons and working alongside the seasons for 65,000 plus years. So there's so much to learn and be grateful for their knowledge and their way of living.
Seasons are really important, and it is something that we miss. And I feel like what you're doing is also about educating everybody, whether it mean the event organisers who didn't realise that it's possible to have an end of flower life display plan, or it's possible to tread a little bit more lightly on how the flowers are sourced.
So one of the things I've learned through starting the business, but even before that, was the Sustainable Floristry Network. What they've done is they've created consumer and industry resources. So you can go on, if you're an event manager, and look at these evidence-based guides that they've created. And it's such an invaluable resource. So one of the things that I've just do now, and you don't sort of do it because you're like, oh, it's going to lead to X, but you just do it because you're like, I just want to see this change. I just want to make sure that you know that this information is out there, because you don't know what you don't know. But you send to event managers or agencies that I'm in contact with, I'll send them a link to the resource, and if we get to work together on something in the future, that's great. Like, I'll put it into practice. But all these resources and tips are out there, and I'm definitely seeing that in the event space. There are so many organizations that are putting sustainability at the core. So it's not just part of like, oh, we've got to tick boxes. It's in the design, and it does come back down to that really important conversations and asking better questions at the design phase. We all know what it's like, and it's like, oh, we would have loved to have done that, but like the moment has passed, and next time let's talk about it earlier. So yeah, with events in particular, I think. So when we were at Secna, Marty, and I was working at Secna, I was also freelancing as a florist. And that was where I had to have a real paradigm sort of shift, because I found it really hard freelancing. And you're trying to pick up any work you can and get experience. And the experience I was getting in was in the event space, and the level of waste was quite shocking to me. But I'm really fortunate, Kylie, CEO of Secna, she just said really simply, this is part of your journey to exploring the problem, to understanding the problem. And I think that is a helpful reframe for me, because I'm so grateful I had all those experiences. And I'm talking just to kind of bring it to life for people. Imagine you're at like a big conference, like a conference venue. You've got 30 tables to 50 tables, you've got stands, and you've got a big floral display on every single one. And those floral displays are made in floral foam, which is, my friend Matt says this really, really good. Oh, that green stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that green stuff, which is a single-use plastic packaging item, which, yeah, if your flowers are in that all needs to go to landfill. You can't compost that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that foamy stuff it has a really unusual texture, and it helps the flowers stay in place. Is that the stuff that you're talking about?
That is the exact stuff. So it's used as what we call like a mechanic in floristry. Or when I did my certificate through, you had to use floral foam to past your Cert 3 and it's still the case, and it's something that they're looking at as part of that education reform, as I mentioned. But it's been around in the industry for like 50 plus years, but it's only kind of recently that we've had studies showing that and confirmed that it can harm aquatic life, for example, and it doesn't it takes hundreds of years to like break down like why is it used in the first place, is it absorbs an extremely amount, like a large amount of water, so to keep flowers hydrated. Well, yeah, what I will say is that there are alternatives to floral foam, and that's one of the key questions I get from customers. So you mentioned earlier, I've been like seeing my role as educating. I often just think that is like just telling people like what I do and being super transparent. I'm like, there's no secrets here. Like, it's an open door. I've never seen being trying to be more sustainable as a competitive edge. I'm like, it's just the way I think things should be done. So like, I'm an open book. But one of those bits is like people ask, so what do you use instead? I'm like, water. Water. Flowers love being in clean water. And they're like, what? And there's like, been like, but surely there's something else. I'm like, yeah, there are other products. Yeah, revelation. But this, you'll like, sure, you know this too, Marty, in the way you live, and everyone that's been in your podcast have heard it's often a return to simplicity. So like one of my biggest inspirations is my grandma, and she talks about the wax box that she used to take to the flower market or to the fruit and veg market, and she'd get all her produce. There were no bags, there were no nothing. It was the same box, week in, week out, one box to carry everything. She's got a box of all her ribbons and wrapping paper. So if I get gifts, it's all reused. And then it's hilarious. She goes, I'll have that bag back, thanks. So like I've learned all of that from my grandma, reuse. And reuse is at the heart of sustainable practice.
Absolutely. Bec floral foam, as you said, is used a lot in many florists. But if we've got that sustainably minded approach, how do we actually talk to the florist when we go in, when we want our bunch of flowers, and say, is there a possibility that we don't use that floral foam?
Yeah, that's a great point, Marty. So if you're conscious of like wanting to have like buy a better bunch, or you've got a design need, it might not be a bunch, you might be going in for a funeral need or an event need. One of the things I'd recommend is so to just talk to the florist about what your needs are and then what's important to you, and ask, for example, do you use floral foam? Is it possible to have this design not made in floral foam? And then request simple packaging. Like if you're looking at their packaging and you don't want to have this plastic ribbon attached to it, or you just want it to come in this box, or you've got a vase that you have at home that you want something made in, just to have that conversation with them. So just request simple packaging, and also just ask those questions if it's not on their website or readily available. When you get a bouquet delivered to you, as important as for us, we want your flowers to survive. So we put them in what we call like a wet wrap. And so you can talk to them and like, how is my flowers wet wrapped? That's where you can sometimes see florists putting floral foam as a way to keep them hydrated. You can just ask, is it possible to not have that wet wrap done with floral foam?
And like even things like vases, because you can, like for some florists, you can order bunches and they come with a vase, and then you end up with another vase in your cupboard that you perhaps didn't need. Like that's also another thing.
Gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up, Marty. That's something that there's a million things that are running through your mind as a small business owner, and there's like things you want to fix. But that's one that I've been thinking about. So on that point, and I'm just like an open invitation to anyone listening, is like send in your thoughts around like, how do we do this? People often say like, oh, can you do like a drop off, like a vase drop off if you get one you don't want? I'm like, the yes in theory and the practicalities of that become a bit challenging. Been like, how will my neighbours feel about people just dropping in vases? You can donate them back to Vinnie's. One of the things I do as a florist is, as I said about, is reuse. So I'll go to Vinnie's. I've gotten so many beautiful. My favorite things are like the vases that I've gotten secondhand, vintage, antique, secondhand stores, reverse garbage, you name it, social enterprises. It's like treasures just waiting to be discovered there. That's certainly one way to do it. Is to source secondhand first. It's just a decision, right, Marty? Like at the beginning, you say, like, am I going to buy this new vase wholesale and sell it off to that person? And what are they going to do with it afterwards? And that's thinking about things end of life. So I definitely think drop off is like one way to do it, or not doing it in the first place, or maybe seeing if that customer has a vase that you want to design in. So lots of ways around it. And I will raise like one of the challenges I'm going through at the moment is in the event space. So when a client might want something really uniform, it can be challenging because you're trying to find the quantities of the same thing. And that's where hiring is another principle I think has been really great. And our industry's got lots of businesses that hire out vases. So that's another way to go about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that comes down to you're trying to design out waste and reduce waste as many times as possible. Correct me if I don't have the right term, but there is a Japanese flower arranging style called ikebana. That's with a
Yeah,
very Australian accent,
ikebana.
I know, but it uses like a spiky thing and is very intentional in the way they design the floral arrangement.
Yes. I'm really glad you brought this up. And this comes back to that designing out the waste. So that principle, the spiky thing you referred to, the Kenzen, it's a beautiful tool. It's got a heavy base, and then the spikes. And so they've been used in Ikebana for forever, but also as well, they're an option in the mechanics that you can use. There are other ways that, so for example, if you're designing, one of the basic fundamental core skills is what we call hand-tied design. So spiraling your stems, crossing your stems, designing that in your hand and in a way that the flowers will sit in the shape. And that is a skill. That is the skill florists learn and hone. So that's one way to do it. You can use the Kenzen little flower frog is another like word for it. You can get those, you can buy those online. There are some Australian manufactured ones, and then there are also Japanese ones as well. And one of the ways that like I've been able to apply these principles, and I'm so grateful for, and also celebrated their 50th birthday this year, is reverse garbage. So reuse pioneers. And where did I get Australian manufactured Kenzens from, Marty?
Where? Tell me.
Secondhand reverse
Oh,
garbage.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
they
So
are they
yeah.
are a great organisation. As a previous teacher, used reverse
Yes.
garbage and love that. It's a massive place of inspiration and creativity, and knowing that it's all secondhand.
Yeah, I literally walked in and I wasn't going to look for Kenzans because it's not something you associate, like, I'm going to find these Kenzans. But I walked in and they were there, and the weight of them, and they were beautiful. And they're manufactured in Melbourne. And I took them to the front, and the lady looked at me and she's like, "You're so lucky. Like, these are the last ones, I think." And like, you could tell she didn't want to give them away. And I was like, I'm getting them before she changes her mind and takes them off the shelf. But yeah, there are other mechanics as well. So for example, you think about like framework. So there's some great examples of like reusing different frames. I use a lot of found objects. Literally, I'm making a seascape at the moment out of these two bits of like, it's just a square metal frame. I don't know what they would have been, like a grate or something, but you can use chicken wire, is another example of being able to get some like structure in there so you can be poking the flowers in. They're all alternatives. There's Agrawall is another one. I haven't used it personally. There are other brands out there that are creating alternatives, but yes, there's the Kenzen is something that is a beautiful mechanic to use.
And quantity. So when it goes to local and seasonal flowers, how do you go with quantity? Because you're not accessing like perhaps that huge quantity that is imported.
I'm a smaller florist, so it's not so much of an issue. But again, I'll talk just from my personal experience is that it kind of comes back to like the what is it you're trying to achieve? What's the intention you're trying to achieve? What is it you're trying to do with the flowers? And if it's in the event space and someone says, "Oh, this is," they come in really hard with a view of this is what I want. We can break that down and be like, okay, well, if it's, this purple rose, and I'll say, okay, well, roses aren't in season, but there's this other beautiful alternative that's in the color palette that you're after. You got to talk people through the alternatives, and that's where your knowledge as a florist is paramount, right? Talk people through the alternatives. If it's something highly scented they want, talk them through what's highly scented and in season. There are always alternatives, and I think it's just about getting back to before. If people are really fixed on an idea, just try and unpick like why is it that idea or why is it that particular flower, and just caveating, right? Like I'll say to people, I'll do my best to get X, but one of the things I'm learning so much about is growers, there is no guarantees, Marty. You can't walk into the market and say, is this going to be here next week? And that's the best part of the market. It is different every single day you go. It's never the same. Certainly, and I'll just say, like, in terms of the procurement process, you order in advance with growers. And if you can't get what you want, you find a substitute. And that's part of the design process. So they teach you this in the Certificate 3, and you have to hone this skill. But most recently, I did an event for the University of Sydney. So they launched their For Good campaign. It was at Sydney Town Hall in Gadigal Country. It was absolutely amazing. And I worked specifically with Australian grown native flowers for that event. I'm so grateful, and I'll shout him out. Here's Craig, Scott of East Coast Wildflowers on beautiful Darkinjung country on Mangrove Mountain. And I'm so excited to just share. It was tilapia season. Waratahs are out. But I was pretty clear. I was like in my email I said the Waratahs are on the stage. They're the hero flower. So look, if they're not around, let me know. But the quantities, right? There was two parts to that came back from my order in the rest of the table designs that Craig just said couldn't get. And so you have a backup for that and you walk around the market and you find it. And that's how it works. So yeah.
Yeah.
But that's again,
Uh,
being a smaller florist, I kind of maybe that's a luxury I have.
Yeah, and it's really good to switch people's perspectives to go, don't focus on just the flower, focus on other elements of the design, as you said, with colour palette or what can be the hero and having, as a florist, what can be that backup flower. Wow, waratahs are pretty amazing, which then begs the question of when you're choosing native wildflower suppliers, to grow wildflowers, do they have to have certification to say that they're specifically grown for this reason? So they're not like people just doing the wrong thing?
Yeah. I don't have all the technicalities, Marty, like off the top of my head. But yes, I do know, and I've seen this. So recently I did a tour called Walking on the Wild Side run by Wildflowers Australia. And that was at East Coast Wildflowers. So you do have to have, and they do this is, so say with Actinotis helianthi, the funnel flower, that's a protected species. So they have a license to grow that. And when you get to the market, that's all labeled. So same with the Gymea lilies as well, like protected species, they have the license to grow those. And then they're all tagged at the market. So that's, yeah, certainly something like I'm building my knowledge of and I look for, and the growers are doing as well. But yeah, that exists with the wildflowers and protected species, those labeling requirements. And then you won't see that, I guess, as a customer because all that information or the packaging is removed by the time it gets to you.
When you go to the markets, where do these local flowers come from at the Sydney markets? Are they all New South Wales? Are they from Western Australia as well? And how do you know that those suppliers providing Australian flowers?
There is like a list that you can see the growers, but the growers change their stands depending on the day and as well as like depending on like who else is coming in. So, but there are certain growers that stay in the same stands. This is what I mentioned earlier about like my trainer at Pearson's was amazing. Being like, get to the market, get to know the growers. You ask like, where's this come from? Did you grow it? Where has it come from? So to be in the market and then also be a wholesaler that grower needs to have also originally like grown something as well. So it can be a blend. They'll have their farm and then also be wholesalers. Like you'll have everything on the floor. And then sometimes the packaging can tell you, like, you can see it's a Dutch import or you can see it's like Australian grown because it's on the packaging, but it's all in one sort of place. So there is that bit of like, you need to exercise that discernment and ask if you're trying to buy something that's Australian grown. I'll just double check sometimes because I might not be sure. I'll say, are these the local chrysanthemums or are they the imported ones? Oh, they're the local ones. Okay, good. Are these the local Cymbidium orchids? Are these imported? So there's that. The packaging can also, there are certain ways that imported flowers are packaging, so that can kind of be your giveaway. That's like a helpful visual reference. But it comes down to asking the growers, like, it's 4:30 a.m. Marty, like, and they're trying to sell their
So
product. You're not sitting
early.
there being like, hello, no, like you're not doing like, hello, I'm trying to do like a biography on you and like learn everything. So I'm just, my sort of approach has been just like over time chipping away, buying from them, but also like learning a bit more of the stories. I try and learn independently as well, like go on their Instagram, go on their websites, or go and like talk to people who've been in the industry and ask about them. And we were really lucky to do farm tours when we were at Pearson's. It was one of the part of the enrichment experience, and that was an absolute highlight. Going out to Dural, a lot of the farms are in Dural, Yandera, Mangrove Mountain. Like our growers are all over New South Wales, Southern Highlands. So it's not you walk up to a stand and that's immediately obvious. It's just learning about the grower, where they come from, and then also if they're selling other blooms from other farms as well, where they come from.
Bec, what's your favourite sort of flower to work with?
I love broken things. So I'm reading the book called The Tulip by Anna Povard, I think her name is, and it's like this history of the tulip. And I'm like learning about like broken tulips, where that color like paints through it. Looks like little licks and flicks, and anything that's got like a variegation in it, I'm obsessed with. But I mentioned before on like Paula's roses. So Paula's one of our like amazing rose growers. B&B Flowers is the name of her business, and she has these particular roses. I think it's called the Matisse rose, and it's like this hot pink and red. And if I get a bunch of those, I'd be like, that's it, done, sorted, married for life, sweeping off my feet. One other flower that really just, gets me is the kangaroo paws. So Craig, I mentioned before, grows an incredible variety. I think he's got 50 plus varieties in terms of the colours of kangaroo paw growing on the farm, so they can supply throughout the year. And everything from like that really tall, strong stem, long, big bush glow or bush, it's called gold landscape, really bright, vibrant color, all the way down to like the purples and the really muted tones. It's an incredible flower. And I think what's really nice about that one as well is, and this is what I often talk about with people, is you see a flower at the market and then you look around and then it'll be in like a roundabout or it'll be in someone's garden, and it's like really special to just notice it more because you've worked with it. There's lots of things that go into my mind when I'm making something, but one of the things that goes into my mind when making something for someone is I do like to give them a flower that they're not necessarily going to see somewhere else because it's been grown by someone. I think that's really special. So like as you mentioned before on the tilopias not being super common in like people's gardens. Bless my mum, she's trying to grow them right now, and I really hope for her that we get them. She's got the white shady lady variety growing, but the is to give them that little bit of wow moment, and like, oh my gosh, I've seen this before. But yeah, those are my favorite. What are your favorites,
Yeah, I
Marty?
think my favourite flowers, they bring up many different kind of memories and senses. So the Cymbidium orchid, I did not have an association to until my son was born in 2005. Oh, it's even making me a little bit
Wow.
teary where I know, my nana had bought that. She couldn't make it up to the hospital to see me with my new bubs. And so she bought the Cymbidium orchid. And now we have one in our garden. And it flowers at the same time, the same month that he was born. And it just makes me so sad. It makes me happy sad, as you can
Yeah,
as you
happy
can
sad.
yeah, it's a happy sad. So I really like the Cymbidium orchids for that memory side of things. And the other one is the Singapore orchid because that's on my granny on my other side. My pa used to buy Singapore orchids for her all the time. And this is when he used to work overseas in Singapore. And this is going back, in the
Oh,
60s, 70s. So he would always buy her Singapore orchids. So again, it's a bit of an emotional memory. But then I also love lots of other flowers. Like, yes, the kangaroo paw, I think it's spectacular. A lot of the Western Australian flowers are also spectacular. So the flowering gums. I'm
they're
also
incredible. Yeah.
attracted to like textures of things. So like the textures of the snow gums and the bark that's in
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like I'm attracted to so many different things.
Yeah.
And when you go out walking, because I love bushwalking as well. So when you go bushwalking, you see so many beautiful natural native flowers that just look perfect in the environment. Gymea lilies, there's another one, like you were saying that before.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
reminds me very much of where I grew up in the Sutherland Shire in Sydney, which there's a suburb called Gymea for that very reason. So I have a lot of association with flowers, mainly native, I suppose, but apart from those orchids.
That is one of the biggest joys, is like the intuitive power of flowers to connect us to place, memory, people, community. It is so intuitive. And there's a really amazing poet called David White, and I was listening to him on Conversations a few weeks ago. And he's talking about it's intuitive for people in those moments, like say in a funeral or in a wedding, in those significant moments in life, to reach for poetry. And I was like, that's so true. And I feel the same way about flowers. Like it's intuitive that we to express ourselves. And as you said, around like this, the reverse of that, seeing the flower in the way that it transports you back to that moment with your son, or in the case of your like grandparents, it's yeah, that it's an enduring and eternal, like that sense of connection and meaning. So special. And I love Cymbidium orchids are, I'll give them a little shout out. They are an incredibly long lasting cut flower. And they're actually one of my favorites. I hear this all the time, Marty, is I don't buy cut flowers because they die. And that makes me sad. And I hear that and I'm like, like, that's so sad that flowers have made you sad. That is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. But the reframe, I kind of try and I'm working on it now. I haven't shared it out with the world. Maybe this is again, they'll be like, let me know what you think of this reframe, but is, oh, that's really interesting that like that's your experience with flowers. I agree, they do die and like they definitely come to the end of their life. Some of them look really great when they dry out. They just continue to evolve and sort of surprise us. But in a way, like candles burn and cake gets eaten, and that's, if anything, that ephemeral part of flowers is the beautiful part. It helps ground us and be present.
That's really interesting about not having cut flowers because they die. I have a bunch of flowers. I don't even know what kind of flowers they are, but I picked them up from the crop swap a week and a half ago. And they're still going strong because, like, I'm refreshing the water, and I find that when you're at home, you do need vases of different sizes because once they start getting a bit, I don't know what you call it, but you can see that they've had too much water on the stem, they go rancid. So you just cut them down shorter and shorter, and so you need the smaller vases, and so they can last a really long time.
Yeah. The lovely customer, she buys my flowers regularly. And we were laughing because she's like, oh, I found this. She's always showing me really great artisans. And I'm like, you keep them coming. Like, you can never have too many vases. And there is that point of and I do think about this when I make a bouquet as well. If I'm including a flower that I know is not going to last as long as another one, I can try and get a mix in there so that as the stages and the flowers progress, you do what you do, which is you take out those little flimsy ones that have done their bit and I go, thanks for looking beautiful for 5 days. Let's leave the rest in there. And they evolve. And that's I actually think the part of like that mindful practice of whether it's you're watering your plants, but you're looking at those flowers, you're seeing how they're changing, and then you're taking that time to refresh the water. And the easiest way I say to people, like, they're like, how much water is too much water? I'm just like, would you drink it? Like, that's like looking at the color of the water, I'm like, would you drink it? If you're not going to drink it, your flowers probably won't. But there are also flowers that are much thirstier than others. And florists, this is all the things you learn is like hydrangeas, thirsty flowers, like, got to keep that water up, otherwise they're going to wilt. Tillopias and hydrangeas drink through their petals, so you got to spray them, mist them. And yeah, so there's so many flowers are all got little personalities and characters.
Thanks, Beck, so much for your time today. It really links in with having a much healthier community, much healthier planet, like looking after our planet a lot more by choosing local flowers and locally grown. And also that power of collaboration is extremely important, as you said, with small businesses supporting small businesses and how we as customers can also support those small businesses. So this has been a lovely discussion about those all-encompassing elements of sustainability. If you have one tip that you could share with everybody about how to go about choosing sustainable flowers, what would that be?
My one tip would be to go to the Sustainable Floristry Network website. It's an excellent website and it's got resources for consumers and it's got resources for industry as well. So if you work at a memorial or crematorium, if you want to buy a better bunch, if you're an event manager, there are resources on there for you. You can also look at the Sustainable Floristry Network member directory and look up, see if there's anyone near you. And my other tip, I know it was only like one, but is to please pop into your local florist, go have a chat with them, go learn their story and ask all the questions you want. I know they'd be more than happy to have a connect with their community and their customers.
They're excellent points. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you so much, Marty.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Renewy Living podcast. I hope you're feeling more confident about taking a localised and actionable approach to living sustainably. If this episode has inspired you to take simple action, please follow the Renewy Living podcast so you can catch every episode. We'd love it if you could share this episode with your friends. It's a great way to spread the word and help more people join the conversation about living sustainably. You can even send me an email with the episode that really made it for you. Hearing your positive actions for change helps me understand how these stories work within our shared communities. Head over to my website, renewyliving.com.au for the show notes and blog posts from this episode. I look forward to sharing more stories from the people of Newcastle as we delve into our community's diverse social and environmental practices for positive planetary change from a localised perspective.